Hi, everyone. Good evening. Just another minute before we start. All right. So, good evening, everyone, and namaste. Thank you for registering for this masterclass. And we promise this session will be a very interactive and informative one. A few points. Please keep a pen and a notebook handy. We request your video and mics to be set on mute and switched off for the duration of the session. You can post your questions in the chat box, and we will take all the questions at the end. In case we can't get to all of the questions, we will share these questions with the participants. And I'm going to start by introducing our first speaker and expert for this evening, Rajesh Kamat. So Rajesh is the founder of Chanakya Consulting Insights. He's also the co-founder of Chiranjeev Gurukul. Rajesh is a keynote speaker, a consultant, facilitator, columnist, teacher, coach, and a lifelong learner. His purpose is to apply principles from eternal global wisdom, especially Indian, to modern organizations. He is known for combining best of Western and Indian management science to provide leadership consulting to corporates whilst also contributing to education and society at large. He has used the teachings of Kautilya Arthashastra to help transform many modern organizations through building leadership capability, and since the last 6 years through his enterprise, Chanakya Consulting Insights. Our second speaker today is Praful. Praful is an Indian entrepreneur with wide interests spanning hospitality, horticulture, arts, and sports. Praful is the co-founder and MD of Chiranjeev Restaurant and Foods Private Limited. He's also the co-founder of Live Life, Love Life Charity Foundation and the founder of Chiranjeev Gurukul. For the last 23 years, he has owned and operated Malacca Spice. He has conceptualized and operated successful concepts in hospitality. And under his guidance and vision, our group has expanded into several restaurants and home delivery businesses. Praful is also the co-founder of Live Life, Love Life Charity Foundations, which in the last 6 years has actively been working towards organizing camps and raising funds towards cancer detection and treatment. The charity has managed to raise more than 2 crore in funds from inception till date. So thank you both for being here, and it's over to you, Rajesh.
Thank you, Darren. Thanks so much. And also thank all our participants. Namaste to all of you. Salutations to our gurus who have made this possible, because everything that's happening today is by virtue of the fact that we have so much available to us that we can share with you. So I want to first of all, not only thank you, but congratulate each one of you, because you are a select lot of people who are going to get introduced for the first time to 2 of Indian sciences in the same session. So what am I speaking about? Let me share a little bit about my journey, just in a nutshell. About 6 years back, I had the realization when I stopped working for the last consulting firm where I was an employee, and I decided to do something which would be different and still add value to everyone whom I knew. Thinking about it, I thought there is just too much that has already been done in what we know as modern management. And still, that was the area I knew best, having worked in corporates and consulting firms for over 20 years. But then I decided there is a rich treasure trove which has been unexplored, which I knew a little about, but which I was dying to learn more and share with people. And thus the journey began 6 years back of exploring more and more of what in Indian wisdom is applicable to organizations and people today. So when I began this journey, I didn't know, but I knew somewhere that this would lead to something great. At that point in time, I didn't know too much about Indian wisdom itself. But thanks to a lot of customers, a lot of clients, a lot of good people who have supported and who have enabled me to not only learn, but to apply all that's available in Indian wisdom, some of which I'll be sharing with you. Today, we are at the threshold of starting an online Gurukul, which will be called Chiranjeev Gurukul, that will be teaching people how they can apply Indian wisdom in their respective personal and professional lives. And you will see, you will get a great glimpse of it today. So that's where we are. Now, for letting people know what we'll be doing in this Chiranjeev Gurukul in some detail, of course, we shall spend the last 5 minutes to tell you about the course. But today's masterclass is to introduce you to something that is so exciting, we can barely contain ourselves. So, are you ready for the journey? Tejal, I'm going to request you to please have the sharing of the deck that we have. So welcome everyone once again to the journey. And as you know, today's masterclass is on sciences of prosperity. But that's not all, as applied to life and business. And in this short time span of just 1.5 hours, you're not only going to get some key concepts, but you will also see the application through a case that we are going to present before you. Yes, so let's go to the next slide, please. So most of all, I am a storyteller. What I love doing most is tell stories. And why not? Because Indian wisdom is all about stories. So when I share this story with you, please listen very carefully. It's quite possible that almost everyone has heard this story. It's possible that many of you have told your child this story. So in a very prosperous city, almost 2000 years back, a city called Patliputra, which is the same as today's Patna. There was a very rich merchant called Manibhadra. He had prosperity in his life, but he was not selfish. He had a lot of wealth of which he shared very freely with those who needed it. So not only was he a business person, but he was also a philanthropist. However, as we know, life takes a turn at any point in time. Manibhadra fell on hard times. It is said that most of his business was through the ship route, water routes, where his goods were carried on ships in what we know today as the Bay of Bengal. Unfortunately, there was a cyclone and all of his ships that were at sea met their end. So Manibhadra fell on hard times, and that shows the true character of people, right? Manibhadra did not change, but people around him changed. Many people stopped speaking to him. Those who were his close friends now turned their backs on him. And the frustration, not so much of the near poverty that he was facing, but the frustration of people's attitude towards him, how relatives were distancing him, made him feel desperate. He decided one night, pitying his own condition, that the next morning he'll walk out early and go into some distant forest where he'll end his own life. At least that way he thought. His wife could go to her parents and relatives who were relatively well off, and she would not have to face this misery. Having decided so, he went off to sleep. But in his sleep, he had a dream. In that dream came a monk, a completely bald-headed monk, as many monks are. His name was Padma Nidhi. And Nidhi, as you know, is a treasure. Padmanidhi spoke to him in the dream and he said, Manibhadra, don't get dejected. You have done many good deeds, and so have your ancestors before you. As a result of that, you have a lot of accumulated good karma. And I am that, the treasure of that karma. So tomorrow, I'm going to approach you in your home. Mind you, you will know it is me because even though I'm a bhikshuk, I will not be carrying my begging bowl. And when I approach you, you must take a wooden stick in your hand and strike me on the head. At the moment you strike me, I will get converted into a heap of gold coins. And with those gold coins, you can start your life all over again. The dream ended. Manibhadra fell fast asleep. When he woke up the next morning, he was wondering whether, there is any truth. After all, dreams, Manibhadra thought, especially when a person is ill or sick or desperate, often are manifestation of wishes, but having no truth to them. Nevertheless, he sat on the porch of his home. His wife was sitting not too far from him. There was a traveling barber who also was attending on her to do her manicure. And at that same time, Manibhadra saw a monk walking towards him, looking exactly like the one who had come in his dreams. Bald and carrying no bowl in his hands. As soon as he came close by, Manibhadra picked up the wooden stick that he had kept ready right next to him in anticipation and hit him on the head. The moment he struck him, the heap of gold coins presented itself. Manibhadra took the money inside, but he did not forget to give part of that to the barber who witnessed the entire scene. He gave him the money, thanked him for his services, but also told him that he should maintain secrecy because otherwise that would create a problem. The barber promised, but he went home incredulous about what he had seen. And he told himself, oh, now I know how these people get rich. They hit all these bald monks on their head and they get their wealth. So he decided he's going to do the same. He went to the nearest monastery and he invited the monks over there for lunch, for a meal at his home, promising them sumptuous food. The head of the monk said, hey, we don't eat like this. We only go uninvited, and that too only to sustain ourselves. Such food is not for us. Now the barber persisted. He was smart enough and he kind of thought of another plan. He told them, look, I have lot of wonderful cloth with which to bind your scriptures. I also have some fine clothes to give you all. I'm sure you all will accept that. Look at it. Even monks sometimes get tempted. The head of the monks as well as the monks said, okay, we will visit your home. And when they came the next day, as soon as they entered, they asked, but where is the cloth that you had promised and the clothes that you had promised? The barber immediately bolted the door from inside and picking up one of the many sticks he had kept ready, he started hitting the monks one by one on the head. None of them were converting to the gold he was anticipating. So he started hitting them even harder. 2 of them died instantly. 4 of them quickly bolted open the door and started running in the street. Save us, save us. Luckily, the Kotwal's men saw what was happening. The barber was running behind them. He caught hold of the barber and took him to court. The court said, you please tell us why you were performing such a barbaric act? Speak up, otherwise we are going to kill you immediately. The barber narrated all that he had seen at Manibhadra's home. So Manibhadra was summoned. Manibhadra explained what had happened in his dream and why he had performed the act that he had performed. The judge realized that the barber had been foolish and put him in prison because he had killed 2 monks and hit very badly 4 other monks. That's the story. And mind you, if you have narrated this story to children, you probably told them, hence we should not be greedy. But the real essence of this story is something else. Tejal, please. The barber, yeah, I would love you to reflect, but I'm also going to tell you my own reflection. The barber hit the monk because, or rather the monks, because he concluded it is merely the hitting of the monks on the head which gets money. What he did not know is that Manibhadra had performed many good deeds on a regular basis. He also did not know that Manibhadra had gone into a deep sleep and he had a dream in which the monk appeared. And then as a result of what he had seen in his dream, he had struck the monk. What is the deeper meaning behind this? Good deeds being performed regularly, friends, are a preparation. A preparation for what? A preparation for going deep within. Sleep and dream is purely a metaphor for going deep within and meeting your real self. And striking the monk, remember, the monk was only a manifestation of his own karma. So striking the monk was an equivalent of purposeful activity in order to gain prosperity. So preparation, going deep within, and purposeful activity to gain prosperity. I hope you have noted this because we are going to come back to this a little later. These 3 parts are extremely important and invaluable to what we are going to discuss today and for all of us in life in general. Preparation, going deep within, and then purposeful activity to gain prosperity. Next, please. So think about it. The world as we know today, and I'm not talking just about pandemic times, we are hearing about that all the time, right? But if we just look at the world today, think about it. What's great about it? Oh, there are many good things. There's technology which is developing. Almost everyone, or let me say many people, have a raised standard of living. Medicine is available much better than what it used to be. Learning opportunities are there aplenty, much more than our parents ever had. The ability to make connections across the world with a lot of good people at different levels. And there's a brilliant opportunity to tap entrepreneurial spirit. We are seeing it all around us. But then what's not so great? Rather, let me say what's greatly missing. Next, please. There are also some things which we are missing very badly. I'm sure you will all agree. The development of character. We hear so many parents saying, look, today values have deteriorated. The development of character. Values in relationships are reducing. We all know this. Ethics in business. We don't even know. We are suspecting this pandemic is man-made. Prosperity is missing for all because there is no equity in society today. There are the rich who are getting richer. Sure, we are some beneficiaries of effort who are also getting better off, hopefully. But there are lots and lots of people who are still suffering, and peace of mind most of all. I don't know how many of us have it as a percentage of whole of humanity. Next, please. So what can we do about it is the question. We can do something about it only if we can get to the root cause of these problems. And I'm going to tell you something which is science, which is not spirituality, even though many of us believe so. But I know you as an audience are very knowledgeable and will understand what I'm saying. The external world is only a manifestation of the inner world. The world inside our heads, inside each of our heads. And as we are fragmented and conflicted within, the world outside is becoming conflicted and violent. So what do we do about this? Next, please. So what are the solutions? And I'm going to dwell on what do we need in a very brief way. Next, please. I'm going to introduce to you a concept by someone who taught the science of prosperity 2,500 years ago. His name is Kautilya. Kautilya is another name for Chanakya. Isn't it sad that today when most of us say Chanakya, people around us say, oh, Chanakya Niti. That's cunningness, isn't it? It's doing all the wrong things. How wrong they are. Because Chanakya never taught doing things in a crooked and cunning way. Chanakya taught the science of prosperity, and he said prosperity can only come if the leader, who he named Swami, I'm going to share a little bit more about that in a minute, has a kingdom or a business which has these 7 elements. The 7 elements, as you can see in the second paragraph, are the leader, the deputies, the customers as part of the world, infrastructure, finances, the team, and external stakeholders. Together, Chanakya says, they make up the leader's sphere of influence. In Sanskrit, he said, Swami, Amatya, Janpad, Durga, Kosha, Danda, Mitrani, Prakrutayaha. That's Kautilya Arthashastra 6.2.2. It's very interesting and significant he used the word Swami and not Raja. And nobody told us about this or taught us about the Swami in all our growing up years. Did you ever hear of Swami as anything else other than the Swamiji in our mutts, our temples, and so on? So how does the Raja or the king become a Swami? Because Chanakya was referring to Swami as the self-conquered person. And only a king who is self-conquered can ever aim to conquer the world. I repeat, only the one who is self-conquered can ever hope to conquer the rest of the world. So I'm sure many of us who live our modern lives say, what is this about self-conquest? Isn't it? Because we know so much about achieving targets, but we know so little about conquering ourselves. Of course, we read about it all the time. I know all of us have read it. So the starting point is a term called Indriya Jaya. Indriya Jaya. Indriya refers to many faculties, but for now, let's take it as our senses. Jaya, as you know, is conquest or victory. So victory over the senses, the one who has victory over the senses alone can be called Indriya Jaya. And Indriya Jaya becomes the Swami who is able to conquer the world. So Chanakya was able to train Chandragupta Maurya, who created Akhanda Bharat, who solidified Bharat as it was at that point in time, and his grandson Ashok created the empire which was the largest in the world at that point in time, all because of being Swami. Next, please. So it brings us to the point where we say, are there other words for that Swami that which we can understand better, which some of us may have heard earlier? I'm sure you have heard the term Raja Rishi, which Plato in Greek philosophy called as philosopher king. Same. That word Jitatma, Jita over self, Atma. Ramdas Swami called Shivaji Raje Shriman Yogi, Shriman as well as Yogi. In Dasbodh, he speaks about Mahanta. And we may have heard of a phrase called the holistic leader. Yes, that's the Swami. Next, please. So what makes a holistic leader? You needn't copy this whole thing because I will pick out the keywords for you. Chanakya also said in the Arthashastra that a king needs, a Swami needs a purpose which is much greater than himself. When I use the word Swami, equally applicable to the feminine Swamini. And Chanakya said, Praja sukhe sukham rajya. Praja naam cha hite hitam. प्रजा के सुख में ही राजा का सुख है, प्रजा के हित में ही राजा का हित है. Virtually saying that the king is a servant of the people. You are at their beck and call, they are not at your beck and call. You are there for their service, they are not for your service. You are because of them, they are not because of you. Next, please. If we were to take it in English, it simply means in the happiness of the subjects, the people, lies the happiness of the king. In the welfare of the subjects is his own welfare. That's the purpose that the Swami always needs to know. Think about it. Today's business leaders, do they think about customers, society, as those subjects, those people whose happiness is paramount? They do not think because they are missing something. At least most of them. Next, please. Chanakya, I'm going to give you one concept. Please only take the keywords. Don't worry about the rest. I thought I must share with you Chanakya's definition of leadership. Chanakya said there are 4 parts to a leader's role. 4 parts to a leader's role. Creation. Having created something, consolidation. Having consolidated, expansion. And having expanded, then succession. The cycle should continue smoothly. There should be no problem in any of this because these are done purposefully and in a well-planned way. I repeat, creation, consolidation, expansion, and succession. Any organization has to first be created. But many leaders forget consolidation, as all startups today want to create and then go to expansion. Neither are the funds consolidated, nor is business consolidated, nor are customers won over. Consolidation is very important. Then expansion, and only then succession. And think about how many businesses miss out on consolidation, consolidation and succession today. the two most missing pieces. Next, please. So that brings us to the word back again, Indriya Jaya. Swami or Swamini has to be Indriya Jaya. It's very nice to say Indriya Jaya hona chahiye. लेकिन कैसा होना चाहिए या कैसे करना चाहिए ये हमको किसी ने नहीं बताया. We were never taught in school. Luckily today schools are at least doing one part of yoga, which is asanas. We'll see more on that. Next, please. And this brings us to the most powerful science of inner abundance called yoga. I'm going to share only a bit of it because you will see in the second part of this program a little deeper understanding of this. But I'm not going to just let him directly introduce it without sharing a little bit of the significance. Next, please. So what does Patanjali, whom we have heard so much about, today again because of Ramdev Baba and not so much because of Patanjali himself, we know was the one who first put together very valuable inputs, very valuable literature. It's not that he invented yoga. Yoga is said to have been started since the time of creation itself. But Patanjali was the one who made the effort to put it all together in the Patanjali Yoga Sutras. And it says, Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha. Now, each of these terms means so much. The Chitta is not just the mind. It is the faculties of the mind. And faculties of the mind are many. But for ease, we are going to say it very simply because today's masterclass is about simplicity. Yoga is the suppression of the fluctuations of the mind. Please think what this could mean. And don't for a moment think this is about the yogi who sits in penance in the forest. Think about the cricketers who are battling it out in the IPL. What makes some perform very well and what ails some people who are brilliantly talented. Their mind isn't allowing them to let go of the devils that are gripping them. So just like today, we say coaching. Coaching is removing the barriers to performance. Yoga is removing the fluctuations of the mind through suppressing them. They will come. But can you suppress them and can you learn this? The good news is yes. Please go to the next. So let's revisit Manibhadra again. We said there are three parts to Manibhadra's creation of prosperity once again. The first was preparation, because he performed good deeds day after day. He was involved in very busy work, right? Every single day, but he never forgot to also give to those who are needy. The next is going deep within. The sleep and dream was self-induced. And then the next morning, he struck the monk on his head. You know what is that stick? That stick denotes discipline. If we perform every single activity of work in a disciplined manner, a disciplined manner is a well-planned, structured manner which all our scriptures have given, especially Kautilya for a king, which my co-facilitator is going to share a little bit about later. That's purposeful activity. So that stick, dand, is actually about maintaining discipline and all activity to be done with an eye on the larger purpose. Then for sure prosperity is going to manifest, not through the law of attraction which we hear about, no secret. These three, I assure you, and we have many examples to give, one of which you will hear later. Next, please. So the preparation, the first part in yoga, is part of a journey which Patanjali calls as Ashtanga Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga. There's nothing mystical about it. Anyone can get into this journey and learn it. And we are going to make it available to every single individual in India and across the world. Preparation consists of two parts, Yama and Niyama. This Yama is not the god of death, but probably it is so hard, so it is called Yama. Okay, I'm just joking. Yama stands for regulation, control. So Yama is abstinences. Niyama is observances. I'm not going into the details of this because you will hear from my co-trainer, co-facilitator. And the going deeper within has many parts till it reaches the last part, which is called samadhi. So asan, just sitting up straight, and many other things which we know the most. Pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, dhyana, and finally samadhi. Okay, I've given the meanings over there. I'm not explaining them now. This is part of a larger course, but I tell you, anyone can learn this. Anyone. Next, please. So now we come to the connection. We spoke about yoga, but we'll see the connection now to Arthashastra. So Chanakya says, Krishnamahi Shastra Midam Indriya Jaya. That means the whole of Arthashastra means control of the senses. No control, no prosperity. I repeat, no control, no prosperity. You will say, how is that possible? We see lots and lots of people who have no control over their senses, but they make lots of money. Chanakya is speaking about not 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, but he says the long term. And not just you, but your family, not just your present generation, but even generations after that. So only those who have conquest over senses can bring prosperity in the long term. Okay, let's go to the next slide and see the last 2 points before I hand over to my co-facilitator, Praful. So if I were to summarize everything that I covered so far, I'm going to give you a wonderful mnemonic, a memory aid to remember it with. Okay, it's called ACE. A, C, and E. A is about alignment of our own faculty. Often our minds, bodies, rest of our inner self are all in different places. And hence performance itself gets hampered. So the first step is alignment through yoga. The second is circulation. You ask, what is circulation? Praful will speak about it because the journey from Raja to Swami is circulating all that you got. Because Chanakya says anything that is kept hoarded with oneself is the first step to anartha, disaster. Everything needs to be circulated. You get knowledge, circulate. You get credit, circulate. You get fame, circulate. You get wealth, circulate. So see. And finally comes expansion, which are expanding all that you accomplished so far to the practices of Arthashastra. The first part, yoga, is inner abundance. The second part is about the connection between yoga and Arthashastra. And the last part is expansion through practices of the Arthashastra. Okay, and Arthashastra, remember, I've given you only 2 points today. I'm just going to refresh. The first point is purpose, which is about praja ke sukh mein hi raja ka sukh hai, the greater good of all people for the long term. And I spoke about creation, consolidation, expansion, and succession. Next, please. That's 2 points of Arthashastra. Next, please. So I'm going to now, with this, invite one with whom we worked very closely. I and Praful go back now several years. But for the last 6 years, we started an experiment which he began by himself long back. But now you will hear his story about how he utilized all of this to manifest prosperity. I'll come back at the end, but for now, pranams to all of you. Thanks for listening to me. Over to you, Praful.
Namaste and good evening. Namaste, Rajesh. Thank you very much. I was transported many months back to your masterclass every day, which I used to be the beneficiary of. And it was a very powerful session. Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, friends. Today, my profile is very different from Rajesh's. Rajesh is our guru. I am actually a disciple. I am more of a student. And today I'm just going to touch upon some of the lessons I have learned through yoga and Arthashastra. And I hope that through my stumbling around in these beautiful sciences, that I can help some of you in the audience if you all are having similar issues and hurdles. The principles of yoga applied to the field of action, business, jobs, and daily life of a householder or an entrepreneur is the basis of this particular session. The purpose is to apply very lofty ideals to real life situations and bridge the gap between the two realities. What are the two realities? The reality is the inner self. First is the improvement, like Rajesh has said throughout this session, of yourself, controlling of your senses, improving yourself, and then externalizing it. So that is our entire attempt in the first part of yoga. For material success, which all of us wish for, hope for, want to be assured and lasting, it has to be paired with dharmic principles. Please don't get me wrong. We see these situations with our billionaires in India. We have seen so many cases where these dharmic principles have been stamped upon, and that material success which those entrepreneurs had are no more. The science of yoga proves these principles to be dynamically valid. My personal journey with yoga actually started like many of us. Started with a cricket injury to my lower back, and I had to enroll, instead of going onto the surgery table, I enrolled smartly into a Shri Yoga class, which with my guru Rajeshri, she helped me learn the asanas from the BK Iyengar school, and protocols was so good that I did not have to undertake any kind of surgery, and she improved my back. So it was easy for me to get relief from asanas and then to believe that I was doing yoga, because I thought yoga started with asanas, ended with asanas. And this is how most people treat it around the world. I do yoga. Yoga is asana. It is unfortunately not at all true. Actually, as my practice deepened over the years, Rajeshri introduced us to the different legs of the Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 principles as prescribed by Patanjali, which are Yama, Niyama, asana, pranayam, pratyahar, dharana, and of course, then comes the most important, dhyan and samadhi. Today, because we have very little time on hand and we don't want to go in too deep except for a master course, we will be handling the issues on only two aspects of yama and niyama, which are basically the 10 commandments. Now, let me just adjust this 1 second. Just hang on a second, please. Yeah, I'm sorry. Okay, as a in my session today, I'm just going to handle the 10 commandments of the yama and niyama, and the way I have applied it to my life. So we start with yama, and the yama is, of course, as Rajesh has shown you, is the control that one needs or the abstinences. So the first thing is, of course, ahimsa. Ahimsa is non-violence or non-injury. Mahatma Gandhi used the first yama very effectively to motivate millions of Indians to fight an oppressive colonial power. And we Indians really touched only the surface with ahimsa, and so did the world. It was suddenly introduced, and it did a dramatic change in history. And everyone said non-violence won us the independence, and ahimsa was trumpeted all over the world. But ahimsa actually goes much, much deeper. And I wish Mahatma Gandhi had spent a lot more time teaching us this and lived at least another 100 years, and we would have learned it better. But it handles the aspect of non-violence. It involves thought, and the thought that we are talking about today is non-violent thought. That is karuna, compassion, love towards other people, which lead to actions which are loving and compassionate. How did I apply ahimsa to the restaurant business in Malacca Spice? You know, restaurants are a business which create a lot of nuisance, and as a nature of its business, and for many years, we were in an area in Koregaon Park where we troubled, just because of the nature of our business, we troubled a lot of our neighbors, and we used to have many confrontations, aggressive confrontations with our neighbors, where we said we wanted to survive and make money, and neighbors said we wanted our peace of mind and our rest. So there would be police complaints, there would even be stoppage of business, there would be authorities which would interfere, and we would fight and we would fight and we would fight. One day, we decided just to sit and understand what was going on and understand the view of the neighbors and look at them with compassion and love, which was so difficult to do at that time because it was all about survival. And we didn't want to do that. But once we started thinking slowly about love and compassion, and we sat down with them, and the attitude of love and compassion came our actions, which was so wonderful for them to accept that the nature of the business was such. What was troubling you? How can we help? How can we help you live a peaceful life in our neighborhood? Stuff like this just helped us tremendously over a period of time. And what happened was all the issues that we had for years got resolved really quickly. And so much so now that all the neighbors that we have around Malacca Spice actually come to our events, patronize a restaurant, and in fact, even send us visiting cards and greeting cards and stuff like that on our anniversary and on our birthdays, invite us to their events and their parties. And this is ahimsa at work. I mean, basically, it has allowed us to have a holistic, loving environment around us, and they all bless us for doing well now. The same attitude has helped us in understanding what veganism is, for example. As you know, Malacca Spice has been a non-vegetarian restaurant hardcore all throughout its existence of 23 years. But recently, once I started understanding the concepts of ahimsa, I started developing an attitude for veganism. And that veganism is basically not even hurting the cow and not even looking at dairy products. So we started developing menus which were very automatic and natural for us because of our study, and that we developed vegan menus which are actually materially very successful. I mean, we must be one of the very few restaurants who have actually started making a good sale on vegan products, And that again is a sense of ahimsa. Going forward, we might even have a restaurant which actually lives by this principle of non-injury and of non-violence. And I think that is something which is an evolution in our thinking, and it has come very naturally to the study of this particular yama. What happens in business or in life is that people get confrontational and will always have something to do with wronging another person, or you have something that has happened which is kind of an injury through non-payments and through property hassles and stuff like that. And what I feel is, if you have an attitude of ahimsa, an attitude of non-injury, issues tend to resolve much faster, even among family members, even among your circle of friends, and even among your business partners. And I feel that this is an important yama. The second yama is truthfulness or / non-lying. In all matters in my life, I have begun not by lying to myself. Okay. And this has been for years. I have discovered that by being truthful to myself, delusions tend to dissolve very quickly. Illusions about myself dissolve very quickly. The minute I'm truthful to myself, it helps me be more truthful to others and more effectively. So truthfulness is actually a very strong point in yoga and in this yama. And it has been very well explained in my life. In this instance, we had a middle management crew member who was actually struggling to perform and was doing really badly. And in reality, he was a very, very good person, a good human being. And we attract in Malacca Spice very good human beings. But in his skills and his ability to perform, he was falling way short. And the only way was to get rid of him. So that was the conclusion. But I and some of my leaders, basically exposed to the same kind of knowledge, we sat down and I introspected and I looked at it very truthfully to myself. And that truthfulness helped, because I could have easily gone to him, told him the truth. Okay, let's just imagine, hey, you're a horrible chap. You don't do very well. Please leave our employ. But that would have really hurt him and that would have destroyed his career. What I did instead was I checked the truthfulness part of it within myself. And I realized that I had not been good enough as a leader to pass on instructions to him. And immediately my attitude changed. And I changed my instruction to this crew member. And believe it or not, the performance improved tremendously. For him, he could salvage his career and he could perform better. He's still with us. Truthfulness tends to remove ego limitations within oneself, and it allows me as a leader to function better. And this has helped me tremendously in my life. So truthfulness is not just as simple. You have to understand in yoga that you have to go deep within. There are many multiple meanings to it. Even in Sanskrit, each word means many things. In the same way in yoga, many things are not as simple as they look, and you have to continue to introspect and go within. So I would ask everyone who's listening to this to do yourself a big favor and do not lie to yourself. Okay. We start by lying to ourselves, and then it removes all the possibility of you saying the truth to anybody else. So if you're truthful to yourself, it is easy to be truthful to somebody else, and it removes many of your delusions if you're truthful to yourself. So please understand that as an important yama. Then, of course, the third yama is non-stealing, which means more than taking another, non-stealing the way Patanjali kind of described it is not about just taking another person's property and running away with it. It also means not coveting another person's property in your thoughts as well. It means not desiring what is not yours by right. Okay, now this is very deep. This is a policy literally in our heads where we compare not, we don't suffer, no, suffer not. Okay, compare not, suffer not, covet not, want not. Okay, it's simple to understand and simple to remember, but this is exactly what we do in our living in Malacca, is that we compare not and we suffer not. So the thing about how has this helped us is that when we have gone into this yama very deeply, it has allowed us in a very competitive environment not to desire another restaurant's success, okay, or their hard work. And this really helps us to kind of develop an environment of blue ocean. existence. So what has happened with us is that we have continued to focus on a very transparent company where we have uh, all the sensitive data that we have, as restaurants have sales data and stuff like that. Right from the beginning, we have shared this with our teams, right up to the members who even wash our dishes and wash our floors. And what that does is it allows that transparency to kind of clearly demonstrate what the remuneration is going to be for each and every member without being insecure about it. Okay, the governance gets its dues and taxes completely cleanly, and which in our industry tends to be a difficult thing for people to do, to really pay your taxes legally and all the time and well and diligently. And it also is a very big hindrance for people to kind of say, if you're doing 10 lakh sale a day, they don't want to show the crew that they're doing 10 lakhs a day, because then they expect the crew to come and ask for better remuneration. We say, if you're doing 10 lakhs a day, it's because of you and we want to give it to you. So we share, but theft is not tolerated. So basically, that's the way we look at the way non-stealing is. It has allowed us in what way to develop. It has allowed us to develop our internal strength so well without focusing on the desire of competing with somebody else or looking at somebody else's growth and success. It has allowed us to have a mind space of our own, and development and innovation speedily in times of crisis has happened. So non-stealing has many deep meanings. Non-stealing is not just taking somebody else's property. Non-stealing needs you to continuously focus on yourself. And it's strange, because when I say that, people say, hey, this is not about you're not talking about non-stealing, but I really am, because you cannot even steal another person's ambition. Okay, you have to look at it yourself. The next niyama is about non-sensuality. Sensuality, or a focus on the outward appearance, a focus on outward acquisition, tends to distract constantly from our inward development. It's almost like having a restaurant, beautifully executed, expensive ambience with the best furniture money can buy, but then not investing money on the constant training in the service and the kitchen protocol for the crew. For example, what is below the surface? Everyone focuses on the apparent, on all the beautiful stuff that you can see, but no one really works internally. And this is a bane of our times, and I see this all the time. People will wear great clothes, but inside they won't develop themselves. It's something like that. So not being able to invest in what really matters below the surface and focusing only on the superficial is all about sensuality. You're bombarded with sensuality today. When you look at the television, you look at a game of IPL, and you will be bombarded with great clothes, jewelry, cars, and it's all about sensuality. It's all about outward appearance, but very little about what is inside. All that we're trying to teach is about going within and not getting influenced by what is in the externals. The fifth yama is non-greed. In non-attachment to pride, okay, greed is what everyone understands, right? But what is non-greed? Non-greed is non-attachment to pride, wealth, achievements, and ego that you have, okay? Not somebody else's, about you itself. So if you have your own property, don't have greed about it. Let it go. You have to be able to let go. When certain principles in business were not followed, by some of our mitras and some of our collaborators, these were restaurants that we had, lots of restaurants, and the principles were not being followed the way we wanted things to be done. Okay. But they didn't understand that we had non-greed. So what did we do? When we kept reminding them to follow the principles and they refused to follow the principles, we just closed our restaurants and we withdrew our brand. Okay, this is despite market perception and despite brand talk, which everyone pays attention to, log kya kahenge kind of thing. Non-greed allows you to focus on principles and the goals of life, okay, and business in the long term. It allows you to do what is right, and it leads to prosperity in the long term. I know in the short term, it may look like we shut a restaurant, but in the long term, it allows us the mind space to work with people who actually might bring to the table the kind of principles that we have resonance with. So this is very important to understand as one of the yamas. So now the 5 yamas are like the 5 commandments done. So I hope, and I know I have to rush through this really quick, but let's hope that you guys have made some notes and we can kind of address it in questions later. Then we come to the niyamas. These are the observances, okay? Or actually very practically, it is the non-control, basically just no, niyama is basically non-control, but actually it's observances in the path of yoga. And they have some great niyamas here. So the first one being cleanliness. Okay, so cleanliness is apart from the obvious, where the cleanliness is next to godliness, meaning keeping your body and the house and the surroundings and the clean environment all around you and all that is very, very obvious. But it moves deeper into the meaning of cleanliness. For us, being clean in hospitality or at Malacca Spice means more than just keeping your crew, equipment, ambience, stuff clean of dust and dirt and pests and all that. But it also means that we go deeper into clean attitudes towards our guests, clean attitudes towards our vendors, clean attitudes towards our crew, clean attitudes towards ourselves. And what does that mean? That means I talk to my vendors, okay, and I say, I want very clean material from you, in the sense that I evolved from using refined oil to cold pressed oils of all kind of nuts. I mean, from sunflower to mustard to sesame to peanut to coconut. And why would I do that? It was 3 times the cost. But I did that because I wanted to be absolutely clean within when I cooked the food. And I knew that what was of best nutritive value. So when you attach the niyama of cleanliness, it goes really deep, and it goes very deep into the food itself, into the kind of practices we have at Cherish Farm, and how we grow the vegetables organically, and how we put those vegetables into the recipes, into the curries. So whenever you eat at Malacca Spice, you should feel the cleanliness of the sutra. You know, the sutra of the niyama has the first sutra of cleanliness. It should translate actually into your plate. And that is what is important to me. It is not just about reading it and following it, but to absorb it and to apply it. Then we come to contentment. When you recognize what is contentment, it is actually something about happiness and joy within, but we have taken it as an institution to recognize, applaud, appreciate the efforts made by your team constantly through public forums. You create great happiness, joy, and contentment in your team, okay? And the stress of achieving, in restaurants, the stress of achieving job goals and sales targets and the blood and sweat of long hours in service, the odd confrontation with managers and dissatisfaction among guests, is quickly forgotten when you you have a system to bring in contentment, joy, and happiness to your crew. And this is a system that we followed. Contentment is a personal journey, I agree, but as an organization, we made it our business at Malacca Spice to make it a system where applause is given, where credit is due is given, where claps are done. We even have sets of clapping, in the sense that we will clap for 30 seconds continuously, like that, continuously. It is a complete rush when someone does well. That everyone waits for that 30-second clap, because it's not a common occurrence. Sometimes when great achievements are done, we give a 1-minute clap, and those are fantastic. So this kind of happiness and joy, and if it becomes a part of the organization, you don't have to actually request your crew members to smile at guests who come in, and it really becomes wonderful to see that. Then comes the third part of niyama, which is the tapasya, or the austerity. We are in our daily lives bombarded, as I said, with messages of so-called good things in life: cars, clothes, goods of luxury, etc. And little do we know that this distracts us from what is really important. The COVID crisis has very clearly and has told us what is important in our lives. And these austerity practices actually came to use when our hospitality industry went into complete lockdown. I mean, we were the worst affected, and we still are the worst affected. And these austerity practices, which I'm going to describe, actually led us to be calm, at Malacca Spice, and it allows us to have calm actions in times of trouble. So, what is austerity? What is tapasya? So in our team, we just pushed ourselves into a period of austerity. All our money disappeared, all our luxuries disappeared. So we shunned it. We shunned most of our past luxuries and distractions. Personally, I intensified my exercise regime. I started waking up at 5:30 in the morning. My pranayam practice, which used to be rare, is now a 40-minute, is a regime of 40 minutes. My meditations, which used to be for 25 minutes, are now for 1.5 hours. I even cut down my meal sizes. I started eating only once a day. And what did it do? It allowed me to be calm, nimble, light on my feet, and it allowed me to innovate. And it allowed my team to innovate. And we started thinking really fast. I mean, just imagine during this time of COVID, 85 lakhs Live Life, Love Life Charity Foundation donated to the COVID hospital. Just sitting on my balcony chair, I could motivate these funds, and we innovated. We created new verticals in our business. We went forward in so many different things, all with joy, all with fun, and not one day complaining about what we were going through. I mean, my team has been earning 30% of what they should have been earning, and I've been earning nothing. And I've been actually dipping into my savings. But all what it does for us is it allows us to understand what tapasya is. And because we love our business, tapasya is very important. Then we come to the fourth point of niyama. Very quickly, I've just got 5 minutes to go. Swadhyay or self-study. Supreme adventure of self-discovery, guys. There are times in life where we have to learn to unlearn what we have been taught in school, in college, and by our parents. I think somewhere Rajesh mentioned this, that sometimes we are taught all the wrong things in these places. And I truly believe that 50% of my education in schools and colleges was, I need to unlearn it. And even what our parents teach us, and also sometimes what our mentors teach us, you need to do self-study. You need to do swadhyay, and you need to have self-awareness. Why? It removes, again, the delusions that have been set by knowledge which has been given to you by others. Remember that there are delusions, there are illusions given by others. So it allows you to observe your own thoughts and actions. Self-study has allowed me to understand a world beyond hospitality. Okay, I never thought that I would have expertise now in agriculture, in sports infrastructure, in education, in social service, in charity, and as well as have a word in my cousin's healing organization, which also works under the Chiranjeev Gurukul, in the Chiranjeev group of companies as Helium. I've been able to really think in these lines because I've had a long period of self-study. So always have self-study. And the last niyama is the devotion to the Supreme Lord. Now, when I say this, people say, oh, I don't even believe in God. Oh, I don't believe in this, I don't believe in that, or I am of this particular religion, or I'm of that particular, it does not really matter. What I'm talking about is devoting yourself to the supreme power of the universe, to the higher realities, which science cannot describe, even you cannot realize. Yet, towards all this, you should have some spirituality. So what did we do at Malacca Spice? We made it our business again. Okay? Because if the power of the universe and the higher realities are not understood in day-to-day life, okay, we have the danger of stagnating in the shallowness of our egoic limitations, our own ego. So to avoid this predicament, what did we do at Malacca Spice 4 years back? This was very strange when we did it. We gave everyone a meditation course, and we made sure that everybody in the crew meditates at Malacca Spice from 11 to 11:15 a.m. It is not forced, it is voluntary. But on Friday, which is our lineup day, everyone in the group, led by Amita or led by Srijit or led by me or led by all our managers, everyone meditates for 15 minutes, because we are hoping that all of us should be on the path to be devoted to the Supreme Being, to the universe. So this is our last niyam. Now, like I promised, I would say I would touch something on the Arthashastra, and I have exactly 3-4 minutes to do this. So Arthashastra with Rajesh has been an immense amount of knowledge for me in the last 3 to 4 years. And my journey from Raja to Swami, as you call it, has started because for years we were following Western management thought and self-help books and so on and so forth. And I graduated through frustrations of this to the learnings of Indian wisdom. I started believing through my personal coaching which happened through Rajesh on Arthashastra, that the only path to prosperity, long-term material prosperity, was in the development of the Swami or the self or the leader. Use any term that you want. All humans, and more so entrepreneurs, okay, and we know this for a fact, especially all over the world, are a little more crazy, entrepreneurs especially, than most. And we all suffer the effects of something called LAGPAF. LAGPAF in the full form is lust, anger, greed, pride, arrogance, and foolhardiness, or Shadripu. In Sanskrit, it means Shadripu. Understanding the various sutras in the Arthashastra and Yoga, I gradually started working on my LAGPAF. And I believe that I have made some progress, some very little progress. I don't really measure it too much because then it could get frustrating. So it's a journey that I'm on every day, every time. And it's a constant search for a better version of myself. And I hope and I pray every day that I will realize myself. Okay. And this is something that should be every one of you, you all have already reached out. And I think each one of you is on your own path, and you should reach out for a better version of yourself and hopefully self-realize yourself. Also, one of the first steps for me in Arthashastra was for me to create what was called the Dinacharya, or task for the day, so that I could handle all aspects of my enterprise every single day and also supervise the Dincharya of my key leaders. So the Dincharya was a very critical part of our existence, and it actually looks after 7 verticals of my business in my day-to-day life. So when I wake up, it's Swami development. That means I have to do my meditation, my breathing, my exercise, my gym, my reading, whatever it may be. I might devote 2-3 hours a day to my development, which is called Swami development. Then I devote my time to my Amatyas, which is basically my subordinates who report to me. I look at their progress, what they are doing, talk to them every single day, find out what their Dincharyas are, and confer with them, even if it is for 3 minutes a day. Then is the Danda. Danda is my crew, my entire organization, all the people who work for me, and to look at their benefit, how I can be of service to them, how we can help them, what are their troubles, how they can improve, what can we do for them to improve. Fourth is Janpad. Janpad is all our market, our entire thing, the consumers that we have, the guests that we have, the people who use our services, and what can we do to improve our services to them. And this is a day-to-day activity. Then comes finance, which is Kosh, which is to do with everything that is to do with prosperity and the money that comes into the organization. And I will pay attention to that on a day-to-day basis. Then comes Durg, which is our fort, which is basically all our establishments, all our businesses, virtual or online or physical. And the last one is Mitras. Mitras are our alliances. So I will explain only one because we just have very little time. Mitras basically could be vendors, alliances, partners, people, mentors, and basically these Mitras. How do I focus? If I'm saying I'm going to do my Dincharya on a Mitra, so let's just take a vendor, for example, who comes into hospitality. We decide that one of the most important Mitras are our vendors, and who we have to keep our relationships beautiful with them and full of respect, full of love and appreciation. Many of our vendors grace the famous Malacca Spice wall. Okay, they are on it with their photographs holding their product. And because we want the whole world to know where we get our fantastic ingredients from. And they love that recognition. They love that appreciation. It has never been done by anybody in our industry. We also make certain at various times of the year that we will invite the vendor with his entire family to come to Malacca Spice and eat the food made from various ingredients that they supply as well as others. And the leaders will sit with them and share personal information and talk and make it really well worth their time. So this is what happens when you are in the Dincharya and you're thinking of how to improve a particular sector of your Saptang, which is the 7 steps. And if Mitra is one of the steps, you consciously make efforts to make sure that this improves it. And now, because of that, we have had vendor relations for 20 years and 15 years and 18 years, through thick and thin, through COVID, through closing of restaurants, through opening of new challenging places, everything there with us. And they like to work with us. It's the same with our Danda, our crew. The recognition is given in the same manner. And the last part, some of the sutras I'm just going to touch upon, is like Samasta Jana Kalyanam Nirantaram, prosperity for all has prompted us to make some of our leaders. Okay, now this is a sutra which is very important for us. I'm going to repeat it. Samasta Jana Kalyanam Nirantram. That means prosperity for all in perpetuity, in permanence. Okay, and this has led us to think very differently. For example, my CEO, Srijit, my COO or my chief of my operations will now start their own franchise for Malacca Spice, cloud kitchens. They will invest their own money and we will support them to run their entire operation. And this prosperity of Malacca Spice will extend further. Many of our core team managers, many of our, even our waiters are also entrepreneurs where they supply us with material and we can pay them top dollar to continue with their life. And it helps not only in crisis, but it has helped move our prosperity along. So in those, I'm just, I can't go beyond this right now because we have run out of time. But I'm just saying there are so many sutras, which hopefully in this course that we do, we'll be able to teach you. And like some of the things are like Vruddhopaseva, where we kind of use, we go out and learn from experts in the field, best practices to be shared, through which our consultancy businesses have opened to our competition, where we share our business practices and so on and so forth. And this has led to a lot of prosperity within Malacca Spice. We have restaurants, standalone, cloud kitchens. We have now the Chiranjeev Gurukul, which has master classes in food, wine appreciation classes. We have what we are talking about right now, Malacca Market, which is actually taking farmer produce right from the farmer to the market. We have Cherish Farm, which is an agricultural tourism project. And we have, of course, our charity foundation. We have Helium, which is a wellness organization. We have social service organizations, which help our schools and alma mater. So we have a lot of few things. But guys, I thank you. I apologize for that small technical glitch which I had, which was to do with my fingers moving across my laptop. And I am so sorry. But I hope all of you got at least a gist of how I have been able to apply some of the principles of yoga and Arthashastra. And I'm still, like I say, a student of these great sciences. And I hope to continue to learn throughout my life, in my commercial as well as my personal life. Thank you very much. Namaste. Darren or Rajesh?
Hi. So I have the questions noted down that were asked during the session. So I've got quite a few, and we'll try to make sure that we don't go too much over time. So I'm just going to ask these questions at random, and then we'll take a call as to how many questions and how much time we have left. Yeah. So I'll go to the first question. It's for Praful. It says, my question to Praful: eliminating corruption in restaurant business entirely is very difficult. What should the broad roadmap be to at least minimize, if not eliminating it, using Ahinsma or any other ideology? This question was asked by Anirudh.
Okay, so can you hear me? Thank you for the question. Corruption basically is endemic in Indian society. One should have a very logical and practical view towards it. But what we do at our restaurants is we use the same compassion and love with all our bureaucracy. We know that the state of our political will and our bureaucracy doesn't match the kind of earnings that they would like, and sometimes they use corruption. They use systems which are not right, and they do come to us and they ask for money. But what we have done is we've refused most times completely, and we've treated them with great respect. We've told them to come and sit with us, talk to us, find out what their difficulties are, where we are going wrong. We found where we were going wrong. To give a clear example, Malacca Spice has a large open space, and we were not always allowed to cover it except in the rains, and we would always cover it. Okay, that was wrong. And it was agreed to do more business or to seat our people more comfortably, so on and so forth. So the PMC would come and bust us. So one day they came in and they bust us completely with police, with this, and 40, 50 people were in there, and they bust us all through. we were already deep into Arthashastra study by then and into yoga, and none of us lost our calm or peace of mind or nothing. And what we did was we just made sure that each one of those bureaucrats were given cold glasses of water, tea, coffee, and our respect and our politeness. No one actually cursed them because they were causing us a lot of trouble, but we actually told them they were right. What this led to was a revelation. One of the bureaucrats came and told me, hey, actually you have enough space to take a legal permission for a shed. And we said, who will do that for us? He said, I am the person who's going to authorize it. I love the way you all are treating us, and please come to me and we will do this for you. Can you believe it? And we just went there and he gave us the permission. And now we have a permanent shelter outside, which you can use in the rains. And this has really helped us because we have done it legally. If we had continued to bribe, okay, it wouldn't have worked. So I hope it kind of explains to you. We kind of showed them love and compassion when they were out there in the sun busting us and we were losing lakhs of rupees. But what we showed them was love, tolerance, compassion through a service. And what did it prompt them to do to us? They went out there and they said, we will allow you to build something legally. And now this is very important to learn. Thank you.
So my next question is for Rajesh. It says, why should distraction of mind be suppressed? Can we accept and be at peace at it, therefore no suppression? This question has been asked by Prince.
Yes, Prince. So, first of all, we must accept, and Praful mentioned it a couple of times, that Sanskrit words have no exact translation. Okay, we seek the translations only for understanding at an initial level. So when Patanjali said Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirodha, the word Nirodha itself has so much depth. The word Chitta itself has so many manifestations. Yes, suppression does not have a negative connotation. Just as I explained, when performance, there are barriers to your performance. For example, I was taking the example of cricket because it's easiest to explain. Sometimes Virat Kohli, just by innocuously developing the constant urge to tap his bat outside the off stump, can develop that habit because of which he'll get caught, in the slips again and again, or by the wicket keeper. Now, he may not realize this consciously, but it is an urge within to do that. Now, someone, which is typically the coach, has to point this to him and say, you have to resist this urge. Now, if he says, suppress this urge, is it a negative thing? He cannot be at peace with it and say, no, I will continue. Now, that's my way. It affects his performance. So suppression here is becoming aware of what takes away from me my ability to be the best. And that alone can help individual move ahead, right? So it's not negative. It indeed is very, very positive, but has to be understood deeper, which we will do. I will speak about it a little later. Yeah, the course that we have. Next, please, Darren. Thanks so much, Anirudh, for asking a very pertinent question.
So I have one more question for Praful. It goes like this. How do you deal with poor performers or staff members who have no desire to align with the organization's working principle?
If there is a failure on by them to align with the principles, like they want to be corrupt, they want to steal from me and stuff like that. Like I said, for theft, we have absolutely no tolerance. Okay, for example. But everything else, we have an attitude at Malacca Spice that we are part of a family. Now, if you have a brother or a cousin who's a kind of a difficult person to deal with, would you kind of throw him out of the family? I mean, I doubt it. It really doesn't happen in families where you kind of reject someone who's in your family just because they don't do too well in familial connections or in the work they do, or they maybe drink a lot, or they lie a lot, or something like that. So what we kind of have an attitude is that if you join the Malacca family, we tend to have an attitude where we will keep working on you to improve you. Okay. And once you suddenly switch, when you start improving yourself, the performance just goes through the roof. So the way we have built our culture, I recently went to Malacca Spice. I go there only 3 or 4 times a week because of the situation that we are in. And I was sitting there, and a high performing service member, crew member came to me, and he told me, Praful, sir, or whatever he calls me. He said, "I'm not ever going to leave you." So I said, where does this come from? I mean, why would you think of leaving me? He says, no, we have hardly, the earnings have gone down and so on and so forth. But what you all have done for us at Malacca Spice and what we have done together for so many years, I can't even dream of working somewhere else. The culture is so deeply ingrained in us that it is very difficult. Even our alumni works with us. Can you believe that the people who have left us, we have alumni parties, in the sense that leaders and managers and team members who have left us, we do parties with them where they come back to these parties and we talk about how their experiences in other organizations are, and we work together. And they may have left us because they were not great at what they were doing, or they were not happy with what they were doing at Malacca Spice, but they're still in touch with us. So it kind of explains to you that when you think of it as a family, it changes the way you think of performance, and it is the way ahead, I feel. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. That question was by Mr. Vora. And now we have a question for Rajesh. It was one of the very first questions in the chat box. How do we define purposeful activity? So Rajesh, I think this could be the last question. And for the other participants who have asked their questions, we will definitely try to answer them in a series of posts, perhaps on our Facebook page. But for now, I think this would be the last question. I'll repeat it once again. How do we define purposeful activity? This is for Rajesh, and it was asked by Rajat.
Yes. So before I answer that question, so I just want some clarity, Darren. Can you just repeat the question? I'm sorry, I missed a couple of words. I want to make sure I get it right.
No problem. I'll repeat that. How do we define purposeful activity?
Okay. Got that. Okay. So purposeful activity is very important because it's very easy to again translate a word in Sanskrit as activity. And I've seen this happening many a times in the translations of the Arthashastra itself. But Chanakya very clearly says that activity which is aligned to the purpose of the Swami. The purpose I showed you earlier was about the greater good of people. One Praful mentioned, which is the greater good of all stakeholders. The second was where I mentioned Praja Sukhe Sukham Ragya, Praja Ke Sukhme. Praja over here is not just employees. Praja over here is everyone who is connected with you, whether it's employees, whether it is customers, and so on. So when I consider that through them, I have to benefit, therein lies my prosperity. That becomes my purpose. And every action, as Praful, very beautifully gave so many examples, is aligned with that. What can make me, for example, speak with, concern, compassion, and affection towards those who have come to bust my business? Because I know that they too have to fulfill their needs. But I cannot fulfill their needs through corruption. I can fulfill their needs through understanding. This is a classic example of purposeful action. So purposeful action is action aligned to the purpose. And Chanakya says very specifically that arthasya moolam has to be rajyam, your rajyam, or even calls it utthanam elsewhere, is not speaking about kingdom, but Rajyam is entrepreneurial action, that which is aligned to the purpose. That's a short answer, but I hope that helps. Yes, I think just one more, Darren, I want to clarify, not answering any questions. I know Sridhar Anna asked a question where he said that it's not about, he was asking the question, that when I spoke about Patanjali Yoga Sutra 1.2, is it liberation of the mind or suppression of the removing of the suppression of the mind? So Sridharna, your question is very pertinent, and I know you are part of the Isha Yoga family. Look, what I shared with you is a most used translation of the sutra which Patanjali has given. I explained that with an example to Prince about the performance of the cricketer who's there on the field. You cannot liberate it by wishing for it. You can only liberate it by removing what is getting and stopping you from flowing freely. Yeah. Yes. Darren, can I go ahead with what I want to share with the participants, please?
Yes, please, sir. Go ahead, sir. Will do.
Okay. So we come to the last part, friends. Tejal, could you go to the next slide, please? I want to tell you that this does not stop here, dear friends. This is part of a journey. This is part of our effort dedicated to the wisdom of our great teachers of India. Why are we doing it? We have a purpose. I have been striving for this purpose for the last 6 years. I met so many beautiful co-learners along with it, of which, Praful and the entire team have been great allies and now endorsers and ambassadors for. We want to make sure that this benefits all of humanity. And I have seen consistently, I'm sure each of you has seen, that leadership that is taught across the world is very contaminated. I say contaminated because it speaks more of the external world and very little about what comes first before you go outside. And even when it goes outside, it is speaking about financial prosperity. Chanakya does not think financial prosperity is prosperity at all. That's only part of it. So we are going to launch in November, mid-November, a leadership course, which will be completely online, with, of course, a couple of meetings as we go along, which will be in person, but otherwise the entire delivery is online. A leadership course, which will cover 3 modules. Next slide, please. The first module, very, very important, is to create the foundation for understanding Indian wisdom. See the difficulty we have in understanding simple words today, because those words mean so much, but we have learned them very differently, right? For example, if Praful were to say cleanliness, he were to use the word shaucha, we'll probably think of shauchalay. And even shauchalay is actually a positive word because it's a place where we purify ourselves. But shauchalay today we think as toilet. No. So there are so many different words and ideas and concepts which are so powerful, it will change your life. All these we will cover in foundation module. What is dharma? What is artha? What is ashram? So many things. Then comes inner work through Ashtanga Yoga. So foundation module runs for about 2.5 months. This course will run only on weekends, so it's extremely convenient. And it will not even be full day. It'll just be 2 hours of that day. Inner work to Ashtanga Yoga comes first, which will be, in all cases, I'm going to come to the methodologies after this, in all cases will be experiential as well as concepts. And then the last and third final module is prosperity as Kautilya taught it in Arthashastra. Okay, and prosperity over here is the manifestation of the work you did within. Only inner abundance can bring prosperity. In our next masterclass, Praful will be sharing more about the prosperity map, which was first thought of over here, which then happened outside. Yeah, so we are going to do all of this using 6 very powerful methodologies. Next, please. This is my last slide, friends. Thanks for waiting with us and giving us the time. So here we are, 6S methodology, just the way Gurukuls would have taught it then. In fact, we have tried to bring even more. First is Shastra. because our Shastra is the basis of understanding everything with clarity. Everything else is made up by those who want to probably make a quick buck, right? Because a lot today has got manipulated. Yoga over here is very different from the yogasana as Praful explained it. And still we have so many different forms of yoga by 101 teachers across the world teaching you what probably is just a simple part of it. So Shastra. Then we have satsang. And here satsang is not sitting together and singing bhajan, which of course is very nice, but we will perform group activities and we will take case studies of several organizations, including the Malacca Spice Group, who have been able to bring this into the organization, some of them not even aware of Arthashastra, but are doing it very naturally. We'll have Samvad, because hundreds of stories like Manibhadra and Napita the barber are there in Panchatantra, in Hitopadesh, in our Upanishads, but their real meaning has never been understood deeply. Hence, I made an effort to share with you what a simple story like Manibhadra and the barber actually could mean. So, stories and discussion around them. Then we'll have Sabha, where we will use serials such as Chanakya, Upanishad, Ganga, and so on to analyze deeply why the characters in that story did what they did. We'll also use the popular clippings of leaders wherever they have appeared for interviews across the world. Sadhana is about actual work through your own research, through your own action on a day-to-day basis. And all of this will be worked with you, worked along with you. And finally, Swadhyay, a participant asked, what is Swadhyay? Sorry, I couldn't respond in detail then. But Swadhyay over here, we will create an entire workbook where every single day you will have reflections to think about, dwell on, go in depth, to analyze yourself, to study yourself, to develop yourself. So when these 6S come together, imagine the power that will get created. Several on this group also today are contributors. And I want to acknowledge the 20 people who are working selflessly towards creating this content for the purpose of this leadership course. So I want to end, of course, we'll also have a word from Praful and Darren after that, but I want to end by saying Dhanyavad to you. But our only request to you is, if you enjoyed what we shared today, please don't let it be just with you. Please share of it, about it, use it, reach out to us. Here you have various contacts and spread the word. We are not thinking that each of you will automatically be a part of the leadership course. You know your priorities. But can you help us at least make more people aware? You can change your life. So with that, my pranams to all of you. I want to thank each one of you for being with us today. I'm handing back to Praful and then to Darren. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rajesh, for a brilliant session again. It was wonderful to listen to you. This leadership course is more of absorption, I feel, because I've gone through a lot of coaching with Rajesh in the last 3 or 4 years, and what I've understood is that if you absorb it, it becomes part of your being, and then it immediately you can start applying it. Anything that you learn and you cannot apply, I feel, is a waste of time. And I have been able to apply the teachings of Arthashastra and my own self-study in yoga to a large extent in my enterprises, in my thinking as an entrepreneur, as a friend, as a father, as a life partner. I've been able to take this forward to many aspects of my life, and I feel that even if you are, not employable as I am. I mean, I'm not employable by anybody. I'm an entrepreneur. I feel this course is most suited to you, but also to people who are in jobs and are looking to develop themselves and become leaders within their facilities, or even to householders, or even to people who are in the house or are agriculturists or anything of that sort. This really will help you change your life. So please spread the word. And this is a fantastic offering from Chiranjeev Gurukul. And God, let the Gurus bless us all. Thank you. Jai Guru.
All right, so I wanted to thank all our participants for joining us today on our first masterclass. And like Amita had mentioned in the chat box, our course will start in around mid-November. We will be posting our updates. So please follow us on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. You just have to search for Chiranjeev Gurukul and you'll find us there. So thank you very much once again, and we will see you next time. Have a good evening, everybody.